Imagine lying in the snow at 27,000 feet. Your oxygen's almost gone, you can't move, and 40 people just walked past you. Not one of them stopped. This isn't fiction. It happened. 3 climbers, from 3 different countries, each left to die alone on the world's highest mountain. Their names barely made the news. Their bodies are still up there, frozen in place, staring at the sky. And yet, these aren't stories about failure. They're stories about humanity. How fragile it becomes when survival is the only currency. On Mount Everest, every breath is borrowed. Every choice is moral quicksand. Would you risk your life to save someone who's already dying? Would you walk past them to live another day? Because that's exactly what happened to Paresh Nath, Khaled Hossain, and Peter Kinloch. 3 climbers the mountain swallowed and the world forgot. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to take you up there, into the thin air where kindness freezes faster than tears. You'll see how greed, corruption, and quiet heroism collided above the clouds, and maybe, by the end, you'll understand why Everest isn't just a mountain, it's a mirror. This is the 3 Everest climbers no one would save. I'm Ben, and you're watching Ben Stories, where real mountains tell the hardest truths. If you care about the people behind the legends, not just the summits, then hit that subscribe button, because today, we're not just climbing Everest. We're confronting what it means to be human. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He didn't even own a car. Paresh Nath was a 58-year-old tailor from India, a man who had spent 3 decades stitching other people's dreams together, while secretly keeping one of his own. Everest. For 10 years he saved every rupee he could, skipping meals, repairing old clothes, taking night shifts, all for a chance to stand at the top of the world just once before he died. To him, the mountain wasn't about glory. It was a promise, a debt to the younger version of himself who believed anything was possible. In 2016, that dream finally took form. He sold his small shop, bought a slot with a low-cost Nepalese expedition, and arrived at base camp with the excitement of a child. His teammates called him Baba, old man, but they admired his determination. He wasn't fast, but he was kind. The kind who'd share his food, help carry a stranger's pack, or stop to check if someone was breathing. But kindness means nothing above 26,000 feet. When the oxygen thins, so does compassion. On May 21st, Paresh left for the summit push. The stars looked close enough to touch, and the wind had died, a perfect window, or so it seemed. But hours later, as he neared the balcony, a narrow ledge above 27,000 feet, something went wrong. He radioed his Sherpa for help. His voice was weak, confused. He was exhausted, his oxygen mask leaking, his brain fogged by hypoxia. And then, silence. When morning came, Paresh was still there, sitting in the snow, half-conscious, his head slumped forward. Over 40 climbers passed him that day. Some paused, looked, and kept walking. Others turned away, pretending not to see. They were chasing their summit, their $50,000 dream, their one shot. Stopping meant risking their own lives, or worse, their record. So they climbed on. For nearly 20 hours, Paresh fought the impossible. The cold, the altitude, and the knowledge that no one was coming back. His wife back home in Kolkata prayed non-stop, not knowing her husband was already dying. Surrounded by strangers who saw him as an obstacle, not a man. But one team did stop. An Indian Army unit descending after their own summit spotted a faint movement. They tried to carry him, share oxygen, even radio for help. But above 8,000 meters, help is a word that doesn't exist. After 2 hours, the soldiers realized, if they kept going, none of them would make it down alive. They whispered a prayer, laid Paresh in the snow, and continued down. When rescuers finally reached him the next day, Paresh Nath was gone, frozen upright, still holding the ice axe in his right hand. He died alone at Camp 4, May 23, 2016. What came next was uglier than the mountain itself. When investigators asked the expedition company what happened, they lied. They said Paresh had gone missing. They deleted summit photos, The Sherpa who abandoned him denied everything. And for months, officials tried to bury the story. Because admitting what really happened meant exposing the rot beneath the world's highest dream. But his family refused to let it end there. His brother begged the Indian government to bring his body home, not for glory, but for peace. A year later, a special team climbed back up. It took 28 hours of digging through blue ice to free Paresh's body. They wrapped him in the Indian flag and airlifted him down, while the entire base camp stood in silence. For a brief moment, the headlines cared. CNN, BBC, the New York Times, all covered the tragedy. And then, nothing. Paresh's name faded like all the others who die without sponsors, without fame, without a viral photo. He was just a tailor who wanted to touch the sky. But on Everest, dreams cost oxygen, and he ran out of both. Up next, another man who reached the top, but never made it home. And this time, the truth was buried deeper than his body. Before the lies, before the silence, there was celebration. It was May 20th, 2013, a bright, windless morning above the clouds. At exactly 9:30 a.m., a Bangladeshi flag fluttered on the roof of the world. A filmmaker named Khaled Hossain had made it. He raised his arms, shouted into the void, "For Bangladesh!" and then radioed base camp with the words every climber dreams of saying, "I've done it." But that was the last time anyone ever heard his voice. Mohammed wasn't a thrill seeker. He was a storyteller, a director known back home as Shozib, who believed that real stories live in places most people never dare to look. He'd filmed the slums of Dhaka, the street children, the exhausted faces in traffic, and said that Everest was the final truth he wanted to capture before he turned 40. To him, this climb wasn't just personal, it was national. He carried the hopes of a country that had never seen one of its own stand on the summit. The government funded part of his expedition. Newspapers followed his progress. And when he reached the top, Bangladesh erupted with pride. But pride has a short lifespan when the truth doesn't fit the script. As Mohammed began his descent, something went wrong. He radioed his guide, Pemba Dorje Sherpa, saying he felt dizzy, disoriented. Pemba told him to keep moving. Then his oxygen ran out. At roughly 28,200 feet, near the south summit, Mohammed collapsed, still wearing his camera harness. He never moved again. Back home, his wife Tamina waited by the phone, eyes fixed on the base camp updates. When she was told he'd gone missing, she didn't believe it. Mohammed had promised her he'd descend right after reaching the top. He even joked that he'd bring back a snowball as proof. But the next update broke her completely. Khaled Hossain was dead. No photo, no video, no coordinates, just gone. The Bangladeshi government announced an official recovery mission. They signed contracts. They paid for oxygen, Sherpas, GPS trackers, and helicopters. The mission returned 2 weeks later with a single sentence. The body could not be found. That was it. But Tamina didn't accept it. She started digging. And what she found made Everest's ice look clean in comparison. First, the expedition company's own Sherpas admitted something quietly over drinks in Kathmandu. They had seen his body. One even said it was lying near the balcony, half buried. Then came the missing equipment. Mohammed's camera, his summit video, his GPS device, all gone. The same Sherpas who'd been paid to recover him claimed they couldn't locate any of it. And when Tamina requested the signed documents of the mission, the Nepalese ministry said the files were lost. Lost, as if paper could simply vanish at 26,000 feet. It didn't take long for whispers to start. A cover-up, a deal gone wrong. Someone didn't want the truth to come down from that mountain. Why would they hide it? Because Everest by 2013 had become a business worth millions, a machine run by outfitters, guides, and middlemen who depended on clean success stories. A client's death, especially a government-backed one, meant scandal, lawsuits, and money lost. So, the easiest way to fix it was to pretend it never happened. But Tamina refused to be silent. She went public, accusing the company of lying, and demanded the Bangladeshi and Nepalese governments reopen the investigation. She spoke on television, to newspapers, to anyone who would listen. Her voice trembled when she said, "I don't need my husband's body. I just need the truth about what they did to him." And that's when the threats began. She received anonymous calls telling her to stop talking. Online trolls accused her of shaming the Sherpa community. Officials dismissed her as emotional. But others began to come forward, quiet whispers from other expedition clients, saying they'd seen similar patterns, missing footage, altered summit records, lies told to grieving families. A retired climber from Australia later claimed he'd passed a frozen man with a Bangladeshi flag patch near 8,600 meters that same week. No one ever verified it, but the description matched Muhammad's exact gear. Years passed. His story faded from headlines. The Bangladesh Mountaineering Federation stopped sending climbers to Everest for nearly a decade afterward. It wasn't just mourning, it was distrust. They no longer believed in the system, and neither did Tamina. She built a small foundation in his name, not for glory, but for accountability. Every year, on May 20th, she climbs a small hill outside Dhaka and lays down a single snow-white flower. It melts by noon under the heat. She always says the same words. "You wanted to film the truth, my love. They buried you with it. But the story didn't die." And she's right. Because what killed Muhammad Khaled Hossain wasn't just altitude or exhaustion. It was a system that values summits more than souls and buries its mistakes under the ice, hoping time will forget. But time doesn't forget. The mountain remembers every lie, every lost climber, every silence that followed. And it's not done keeping secrets, because the next man we meet didn't die from corruption. He died because the mountain took away his sight, and even then, his friends had to make the most excruciating choice a human can ever face. There's a place above 8,000 meters climbers call the Death Zone. The name isn't poetic, it's literal. Up there, every second your body is dying, and every decision decides who lives next. For Peter Kinloch, a 28-year-old Scottish climber, that truth came faster than anyone could have imagined. Peter wasn't just another adventurer. He was a technical expert, a man who'd helped map rescue routes for other climbers before ever attempting Everest himself. He wasn't chasing fame. He wanted to experience what he called the edge between fear and faith. And in May 2010, he got his chance. He reached base camp with a small team led by experienced Sherpa guides. The weather window was perfect, crisp, calm, and brutally cold. The kind of day that tricks you into believing the mountain will let you win. On May 26, 2010, just after 1 a.m., Peter left Camp 4 for the summit push. His oxygen mask hissed with every breath. He climbed methodically, checking ropes, helping others, never showing the exhaustion that eats through every cell in your body up there. By dawn, he was standing at the top of the world. His teammates cheered, hugged, snapped photos. Peter, calm as ever, whispered to himself, "Worth every breath." But on the way down, something happened, something no one could have prepared for. At around 28,700 feet, just below the summit ridge, Peter suddenly stopped. He turned his head, confused. His voice came through the radio. I can't see anything." At first, they thought it was the glare, snow blindness, common, temporary. But within minutes, it became clear. This was something else. His eyes had filled with blood, a rare, deadly condition called high-altitude retinal hemorrhage. The pressure had burst the vessels behind his eyes. He was completely blind. The wind screamed around them as the temperature dropped below 30 degrees C. His teammates surrounded him, clipping his harness to their ropes, trying to lead him down. Step by step, inch by inch, but it was hopeless. Every few meters, Peter collapsed, gasping. He couldn't follow commands. His brain was starving for oxygen. One of the climbers later said, he kept asking if it was night or day. It wasn't just night. It was the edge of death. They tried for 12 hours to move him. 12 brutal, heartbreaking hours in air so thin their own blood was boiling. Each time they pulled, Peter's body went limp. Each time they rested, the frost crept deeper into their fingers and lungs. They shared their oxygen bottles with him until theirs ran dry. One Sherpa collapsed from exhaustion. Another began coughing blood. Finally, their leader radioed base camp. "We can't move him. We're all going to die up here." Silence. Then a reply. Cold, resigned. "Do what you have to do." It's one of the most unbearable moments in mountaineering, when saving someone means killing everyone. The math is cruel. At that altitude, to carry a 170-pound man means 2 more will never make it back. So after 12 hours with oxygen gone and weather turning, the team made a choice no human should ever have to make. They clipped Peter to a fixed line. They placed his ice axe beside him. And they said goodbye. One of them whispered, "Hold on, brother. We'll send help." They turned and they descended into the dark. When they reached Camp 4, their faces were gray, their eyes hollow. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. Rescue was impossible. No helicopter could reach that height. No human could climb back up in time. Peter Kinloch died alone, tethered to a rope just below the summit, where he still remains to this day. His body is now part of the mountain, frozen in a half-seated position, looking toward the horizon he once dreamed of seeing. Back in Scotland, when the news reached his family, his mother didn't cry immediately. She said, "He always wanted to see the world from above the clouds. Now he never has to come down." His climbing partners were torn apart by guilt. They replayed every step, every decision, every moment they thought they could have done something differently. But deep down, they knew the truth. They couldn't. Because Everest doesn't forgive hesitation, and yet what Peter left behind wasn't tragedy. It was the proof of something rare: courage without anger, love without words. In his final moments, he didn't scream, didn't beg. He told them, "Don't risk it. Go home." He died protecting his team, in the same calm, steady way he'd lived. Some say Everest is a graveyard, but for a few souls it's also a cathedral, a place where human spirit touches something higher than survival itself. Peter Kinloch's frozen silhouette has become part of that mountain's memory, a silent reminder that not every loss is defeat, and not every death is wasted. But not every climber on Everest dies like Peter. Some die because others let them, because power, pride, and profit weigh more than compassion. And that's where these stories connect. 3 strangers from 3 nations, each left behind for different reasons, but bound together by one question the mountain keeps asking. When saving a life costs your own, what kind of person are you? 3 climbers, 3 deaths, 3 stories that should have been very different, yet somehow they all end the same way, in silence. Because on Everest, truth doesn't die from cold. It dies from money. For decades, the world has worshipped Everest as the ultimate test of courage, the roof of the world, where heroes are made and legends are born. But behind every glossy summit photo, there's a darker economy, one built on secrecy, greed, and survival theater. Every spring, when the jet stream shifts, base camp becomes a miniature city. Over 1,000 climbers, guides, and workers move like parts of a well-oiled machine. The price of a single climb can reach $60,000 to $100,000, depending on what you want. Oxygen, Sherpas, rescue insurance, or silence. Yes, silence can be bought too. The companies that sell Everest dreams rarely sell the truth. If a client dies, that's bad business. If a guide is blamed, that's worse. So, files disappear, photos are deleted, statements are rewritten. That's what happened to Paresh Nath, the tailor who was left for dead. His company claimed he had gone missing, even though 40 climbers had literally stepped over his body. When journalists asked questions, expedition leaders deflected. We're not responsible for what happens in the death zone. But if they're not responsible for their clients, then who is? The truth is, Everest has become a production line of success. Each year, companies compete to advertise how many clients they brought to the top, not how many they lost along the way. If a climber dies near the summit, their name is often erased from official records before base camp even packs up. And because retrieving bodies is nearly impossible, the evidence stays buried in the ice. But corruption isn't just about cover-ups. It's about incentives. For Sherpas, climbing is survival. A single Everest season can feed a family for years. But when that livelihood depends on speed and results, morality gets complicated. You can ask a man earning $5,000 per climb to risk his life for a dying client who won to make it down anyway. So, when a climber collapses, guides face a brutal equation: 1 life versus 5 jobs. And this is where the myths of heroism fall apart. We love to imagine mountaineers as selfless, noble figures, but at 8,000 meters, the brain stops caring about ideals. Oxygen deprivation makes you selfish, delusional, cruel. You're not thinking about saving someone, you're thinking about breathing. One climber once said, "Up there you don't die because people are evil. You die because they can't afford to be good." That's what links Paresh, Muhammad, and Peter. Each was abandoned, not out of hatred, but out of human limitation, and a system that rewards survival over compassion. And the system has learned how to hide it well. When Khaled Hossain died, the cover-up wasn't an accident. It was a mechanism, a reflex to protect reputations, sponsors, and state funding. The truth would have made headlines, but it would have also exposed corruption that ran all the way through Kathmandu's climbing bureaucracy. The same pattern repeats with every lost climber story. A family waits for answers. Officials issue vague statements. Expedition leaders blame the weather. And the mountain absorbs another secret. You see, Everest isn't just the highest point on Earth. It's the world's most expensive illusion, a place where death is normalized and empathy is optional. Yet, amid all this darkness, there's something paradoxical. For every climber who turns away from a dying stranger, there's another who shares oxygen with someone they've never met. For every Sherpa pressured to stay silent, there's one who risks everything to tell the truth. Everest amplifies both the worst and the best of us. It shows how fragile good really is when the air gets thin. A few years ago, a veteran Sherpa was asked what the hardest part of climbing Everest was. He said, "Not the wind, not the cold. It's coming home and pretending you didn't hear them calling." Those words linger like frostbite, because every year, the mountain calls, and more people go up believing they're chasing a dream. But for many, they're stepping into a place where morality freezes faster than flesh. And maybe that's why the bodies stay there. Not just because it's too hard to bring them down, but because we don't really want to. They serve a purpose. They remind us what Everest costs. They warn us that courage and cruelty sometimes look the same in the thin air above the clouds. Next, we'll go higher, above the myths and the marketing, to the final truth of these 3 forgotten climbers. What their deaths tell us about us, and why no matter how many summits humans reach, we still haven't conquered the mountain inside ourselves. At dawn, the summit looks calm, like nothing ever happened. The wind polishes the snow clean and the mountain pretends it doesn't remember. But it does. It remembers everything. Every step, every scream, every name that was whispered into its frozen air and never came back down. Some say Everest changes you, but the truth is, it only reveals you. The greed, the fear, the hunger for glory. It was already there. The mountain just stripped away the noise. Up there, where there's no mercy and no oxygen, you don't find God. You find yourself. And sometimes, that's far more terrifying. Think about the 3 climbers you've met on this journey. Paresh Nath, who believed that faith could outlast frostbite. He dreamed of coming home to his wife and kids, showing them the summit photo. Instead, his body became a landmark, passed by hundreds who didn't know his name. Khaled Hossain, who carried his nation's flag into the death zone. He was told he made it, celebrated as a hero, only for his body to tell a different story. He didn't conquer Everest. Everest conquered his truth. And Peter Kinloch, the man who smiled even when he was blind. He'd seen more of life in darkness than most people ever do in daylight. But his optimism couldn't save him when the rope froze and the light disappeared for good. 3 men. 3 dreams. 3 warnings that Everest is not a mountain. It's a mirror. If you stand before that mirror long enough, you start to see what we've become. A species obsessed with reaching the top, even if it means stepping over the fallen. Everest used to symbolize human achievement. Now it's a graveyard in the clouds, where ambition outnumbers compassion. But maybe that's why we can't stop climbing. Because deep down we're still trying to prove that humanity belongs up there. That even in the most hostile place on Earth, we can be something better. Each year, new climbers arrive. Some are chasing glory. Some are running from life below. And some just want to touch something pure before they die. They train for years, save every dollar, and tell themselves they understand the risk. But no one truly understands what Everest takes from you until it's already taken everything. And yet people keep going back, because in that thin air between agony and awe, there's a feeling you can't find anywhere else, a taste of eternity. That's the paradox. Everest kills, but it also calls. Maybe that's why we keep telling these stories, not to scare people, not to glorify death, but to remember that every frozen body up there once had a heartbeat, a family, a dream. They remind us that courage isn't about summiting. It's about coming back down. It's about knowing when to stop and still being able to live with yourself afterward. When you look at Everest, don't see a mountain. See a monument, built from every mistake, every secret, every price paid in human lives. Because someday, maybe, when the last climber turns back before the top, that's when we'll finally understand what it really means to conquer Everest. Not with ice axes, not with flags, but with empathy. This was not just a story about 3 climbers. It's a story about all of us, our hunger to rise, our fear of falling, and the cold truth that the higher we climb, the less we feel what makes us human. Because sometimes the most dangerous mountain isn't the one before us, it's the one inside us. If this story moved you, don't just scroll past it. Share it. Let people hear what Everest really is. Not a symbol of triumph, but a warning written in ice. Subscribe to Ben's Stories for more true tales from the edge of the world, where every story is a reminder. The price of reaching the top is not always worth the climb.